Hey, welcome back to Guy Shrink. I'm Bill Roman, host here at Guy Shrink podcast, where we talk about what keeps a guy awake at night, or in some cases on our program, we talk about what should keep a guy awake at night. We talk about a number of things. If you're a seasoned listener, you know that we've covered the map on a lot of things. We got a lot of other things in store for this season. And today's guest is a very good friend, someone I've known for almost over 50 years for sure.
One time.
Name's Jan Meyer, and she is a seasoned therapist, family therapist, marriage counselor here in the Toledo area. Been practicing for many, many years. She's got a lot of incredible wisdom and what I call reflected experience. So, Jan, welcome to Guy Shrink.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Glad you're here. So, as we've talked before on numerous occasions about a whole bunch of stuff, but pertinent to this conversation we're having today, well, what's something that a guy stays awake with? Well, what keeps a guy awake at night?
Well, when you first asked me that, my answer was, as you recall, was nothing.
I remember that. Yeah.
And that led us into talking about all the differences between men and women, because women can stay awake thinking about thousands of things, and men are very different in the way that they process all of that.
Okay, so we've thought about some ways that make the difference. So let's kind of focus today on our conversation about, well, what are some of the differences you've noticed in your practice? And I mean, you're the mother of two sons, so you've been surrounded by guys pretty much your whole life.
And 5 grandsons as well as the sons. So yes,
that's true. That's true. You're surrounded by kids all over the place.
Right.
So what is it that you see as some of the differences that come to your mind, as well as your own life, but also more importantly, your experience as a therapist and a guide for men and women, and particularly guys that show up in your office?
Well, first, I guess I'd like to say that I really wish that all couples, especially young couples, would study the differences between men and women, because it's so significant. And it really affects the way that we interpret what our spouse or friends or in the workplace, whatever, how we interpret their thoughts, behaviors, or what they say and so forth. So I think it's really incredible. And when we talk about differences, we have to remember that the stereotypes are only true 80% of the time. They're not always true. So I wanted to put that little caveat in there to begin with, because they're not always, because some people will come up and say, well, that's not true of us. But there are so many things that are different in the way that we process things, way we talk about things. I guess one of the first things I would say is, if I could choose one male characteristic for me, it would be the ability to let things go. Because, and Bill's going to laugh about that one, I'm sure, because, we do not let go of things. I don't believe there's probably a husband alive that hasn't said, do we have to talk about this again? But that's just the way we are. We don't let go of things. And that's going back to what keeps me awake at night, is that, we carry all these things all day. We put them in our brain, and then we regurgitate them back and forth to ourselves. Another example of that might be that, you have a minor little disagreement in the morning with your spouse, and by 7:10, the argument was at 7. At 7:10, he's forgotten what it's all about. And we, on the other hand, rehearse it all day. And then when he walks in the door, we're kind of sitting there like this, and he's going, well, what's wrong? Because he doesn't remember what it's about. So that's that ability. I wish I could do that. Guys, just know we don't do it on purpose. It's just the way our brains are wired. There's a comedian that did a thing about men have drawers in their brain, and they only have one open at a time. And you have to shut that one before they can open the next one. Okay. And women, on the other hand, have wires, and everything's connected to everything else.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. So, Jan, what are the 4 most terrifying words that a guy can hear?
4 most terrifying words.
What are the 4 most terrifying words a guy can hear?
You don't understand. You don't listen.
We need to talk.
Okay, you don't listen. Right, exactly. Okay, right, exactly, right.
We need to talk. Oh no.
And then, because that means that she's going to go back over something again and again and again. And you're not even going to know. And in my own situation, I remember if I say something like that to my husband, and I'm going on, and he's completely silent, and my comment is, "Aren't you going to say something?"
I don't
And
know
the
what to
next
say.
limit is, "What do you want me to say?"
Right.
He knows there must be a right answer. Absolutely. So that's that difference of us. And they actually scientifically, the corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres of the brain is
Okay.
25% thicker in in women, I'm sorry, than it is in men. And the theory is that that's what makes us go back and forth between different things in our lives.
Okay.
Or
Does that mean that means there's more of a neural pathway then? Is that what you're saying?
connects the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. And the theory is that yeah, another example would be if you're going to the mall and she says she wants to buy, blue blouse. And I can't remember one of the, oh my gosh, who was it? Was it Gilly Smalley? I think maybe that said that men go hunting and women go shopping. So you walk into the mall and there's a
Okay.
blue blouse there. And so he goes, okay, we got it. Let's go home. But she, on the other hand, has to look at every blue blouse in the whole mall.
Okay.
She
Okay.
might come back and get the first one, but she's got to look at everything. Men
Okay.
are, and that comes to that also about men are more solution oriented than women are. We are much more relational. They're looking at solutional. We're more intuitive. They're looking at solutions.
So I mean, what does that mean as far as, couples or just guys in general, solution oriented? We like to fix things. Is that
You want to fix me. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I teach couples all the time. If we're talking about something, we don't want to be fixed. We want you to listen. And if men could learn to just validate and say something like, "Oh, I can see that's really bothering you, honey," or "That must have been difficult," instead of saying, "Well, why didn't you do it this way?" Men want to jump right into solving the problem when we just want to talk about it. Men
well if I can fix the problem though, I won't be a problem anymore. Whereas what I'm getting from my wife is, well, I need to keep talking about this. And I don't want to keep talking about it. I want to fix it. Let's get it over with so I can move on.
Yeah, but see, if you fix it, that also tells us that we're not competent, and we really wanna talk about it until we're ready to fix it.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about a time. I remember hearing John Gottman talk about this very thing. Gottman, you had probably being he and his wife are the world's best
Right.
researcher in couples. And, and he was talking about, I don't remember, he was being interviewed with somebody, I don't remember, but he talked about when his wife Julie says, we need to talk, he just goes, and I figured if this is the world's best guy, about this, and he's already nervous.
Well, you kind of always already think you're wrong, right? That you can't possibly have the answer that she wants. So,
Well, that's what your husband, that's what Jay says when he says, what do you want me to say? Uh,
I did a lecture one time called "Why Didn't You Hear What I Never Said?"
okay.
And part of that is that we are so intuitive that we expect you to know what we're thinking or what we want. And that doesn't work. I learned a long time ago that banging pans in the kitchen does not translate to him that I want help. Men don't take hints. Now, if I say, "Hun, can you help me with the dishes?" He's there, Johnny on the spot, but he's not going to pick it up. He's just not. Or coming home at the end of a day, I see everything that needs to be done. He doesn't see it.
Okay.
And I would rather interpret my husband as being a guy and he doesn't get it than that he's a jerk.
Okay. Well, we got going back to what the Gottman's thing about, oh my God, she wants to talk. I think what'd be helpful for a guy is, of course, our reactivity is immediately there. Our anxiety's up and our reactivity is there. And a way if we could calm our reactivity down. And one of the things that John Gottman suggests when, your significant other says we need to talk is, well, let me get a piece of paper and take notes, which is everybody says that sounds so Bill, but in a way it's effective because it slows your reactivity down.
Mhm.
And he said, I remember him saying that when Julie, his wife, said something that really, angers him, like, irritates him, he knows that if he reacts to that in fix it mode or whatever, that's not going to be helpful. So what he says to her is, honey, would you repeat that word for word? I want to get it down. In other words, he's slowing his reactivity down to avoid that fix it mode, because I think that's what anxiety does to us guys,
Mhm.
is I need to get this fixed because it's making me too nervous or whatever. And so anyway, I found that to be kind of useful, taking notes. And then you're able to say, here's what I heard you say. That I
Mhm.
hear that as opposed to, well, this is what you said, and I didn't listen to begin with, so I'm completely off kilter. So
Well, the
okay,
other
so
thing that that does, I think, is it gives a message that it is important to me what you're saying. Is it not, I'm
oh
just
yeah.
thinking about, my golf game or whatever. I'm really am focused in on what it is that you want. So, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
So your experience as a therapist, particularly when couples come in your room, everybody, at least when they come to see me, couples, the PI, the presenting issue, we don't communicate very well, and just to spend time, well, what does that mean? Communication. Everybody thinks that's what you should get is communication. And so one of the things that you suggest then is if a guy could unwind his need to solve things and pay more attention to what his partner is saying,
Mhm.
that might be a helpful direction to go.
Absolutely. I think it's important to realize that we are never gonna understand each other. I mean, that's not even a really good goal to have, but if we can get a grip on the differences, we can at least honor them. It's a lot more important to honor the fact that we're different than it is to really understand. I can't understand what's in somebody else's head. I just can't. But I do have to be able to accept the fact that we're gonna see that differently.
Okay, I think that a great deal of conflict we have as couples has to do with that whole thing that
Mhm.
conflict is about me making her see it my way. Now, we may not think that way. I mean, we don't may not actually know that's up there, but I do think it's up there
Mhm.
that my job in communication is to make my point clear enough. If I just keep talking or arguing or whatever, she'll see it my way and it'll get solved. So my solution is, well, for some people, yell louder or maybe just leave, abandon ship and get out of there.
Well, and the way we communicate is a little off of the differences, but have you heard the thing about, you can be a skunk or a turtle or what are some of the other ones? But the two that I see being the biggest problem in relationships are the skunk and the turtle, because the turtle likes to stay in his shell and doesn't like to come out. And the skunk is the one that's going to, let you know exactly usually it's she, where exactly where she comes from. And the more she skunks, the more he pulls into the turtle. And you get
I didn't hear that animal world thing, but boy, that makes a lot of sense to me.
exactly. And there's an owl because the owl has to have 10 good reasons why he's right and you're wrong. And this is skunk, the owl, and I'm forgetting what there's one other one. I'll think about it. Oh, it's the gorilla. He has to win no matter what. And he'll do anything to intimidate, argue, whatever. And
Okay.
so I ask couples to try to decide which of those animals they are. And almost always when you have a lot of conflict, you have a skunk and a turtle because you get no place. And it
Well,
really communication.
the stonewalling, in the Gottmans, the four horsemen, they talk about
Stonewalling and Gottman stuff.
help them to get in a way we manage conflict and communicate criticism and contempt or defensiveness and stonewalling, and the guys prefer stonewalling. I mean, I think that's turtling.
Yes.
And criticism is the skunk thing. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So,
Mhm,
so what guys could I like what you said about just honoring the differences, knowing that we perceive life differently can be very helpful.
mhm.
And honor that, and then finding ways by which we can manage that. I like what I believe it's the Gottmans talk about managing conflict versus resolving conflict. I really like that idea. And we're talking about management now, managing conflict, you and I, about
Mhm.
being, paying attention to my wife or girlfriend or my significant other, whoever I'm with. In any relationship, really, the relationship is what counts for women, you're saying, more than solutions group. Guys, we go to, well, if I can just fix it, it'll all look okay.
Wrong. Definitely the wrong approach. Sometimes what women want more than anything else, and I mentioned it before, and that's just validating and learning how to, you don't have to agree, you don't have to disagree, you just validate feelings because women are so feelings oriented that sometimes you can dissolve the whole thing by just saying, well, that was, I guess it would be a good example would be, you both come home from work and she's ranting and raving about what a terrible day it was. And your first response might be, well, I've told you should just tell the boss how wrong he is. Well, you just try to solve it. Well, then now she's not mad at the boss, she's mad at you.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
Simply say, wow, that really sounds like that was, a really uncomfortable situation for you. And then she's not mad at you anymore because you're understanding.
Okay, that makes good sense. I was talking to a buddy a couple of weeks ago, and his wife is pregnant, and they're expecting their first child, and they're gonna do a midwife birth kind of thing,
Mhm.
and the woman that they had decided to do had changed her practice, so she moved to a new practice, and their insurance doesn't take that practice, and so the woman, the pregnant mom to be, was really in a tough way. She was really emotional about it because she really liked this woman who was going to be the midwife of her baby, and so she's saying this to my buddy about she's really upset about it and sad and all that sort of thing, and he says, "You're just going to have to reserve some time to get over that." And then wondered what happened to him, and I thought, Nick, what are you thinking?
What I'm talking about, right? Not the way. Now he may think that was the right thing to do, and he's now doing it to be a jerk. He's doing it because he's solution oriented.
Yes, the dude is a fix-it kind of guy. He's a great guy, he's a good buddy. But I just had to laugh. I go, man, what are you thinking?
Well, and I think a lot of times it's really important for us to understand that we have to teach people how we want to be treated. If
Oh,
we don't learn by osmosis, we have to teach the other person, this is what I need from you. I also tell women sometimes it's really helpful. It works for men too, but if you're going to have a conversation with the guy, tell him what you want ahead of time. For instance, you say, honey, I just want you to listen to me today. I don't want you to fix it. Can you just let me vent for a while? And then he goes,
okay.
I don't have to.
Okay, so you meet before you even begin the conversation, so to speak.
Absolutely.
See,
Okay.
here's what I need out of this. Okay.
Exactly. Or to say the opposite would be, you know what? I really need an opinion here because I'm a little stuck. Can you give me an opinion about what you think would be appropriate? Then he goes, okay, solution mode. I can do that. But at least that way, you're not setting him up for failure because his approach is going to be different than yours. So tell him what you want. Tell him, very gently and lovingly, can you just listen? Or, I'm having a bad day. Can you just, give me a little encouragement? Tell him what it is that you want. And then he at least has a shot at getting it right that way.
Well, my experience as being a married guy as well as being a therapist is that guys' anxiety plays a significant role here. And when our anxiety's up, of course, our ability to think well just stops. It just doesn't work. And so our go-to thing is get over this as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And instead of just saying, I need to be careful that I'm getting anxious. And the other thing is I just need to listen to my partner here as to see what's happening. I really like the idea of being able to speak my need. I need this right now. It would be very helpful, as opposed to it ends a second guessing kind of stuff, but it's very helpful to say, I call that a legitimate adult need. I just need to listen to you right now. I don't need any solutions.
Right.
It'd be helpful. Okay, so as far as solution oriented, relationship oriented, that's what guys are moved more towards a solution, and women are interested in relationships. So, Jan, what are some other differences you've seen over the years?
I think another huge one would be the way that we see things. For instance, men tend to be fairly tunnel visioned, and women see the bigger picture. And that shows in many different ways. I always think of an example. I have identical twins, and I remember when they were about 2 or 3 years old, we were getting ready for church, and I'm running around trying to catch two naked little boys, getting them dressed. And my husband walks in and says, "Is there anything I can do to help?" I'm going, "You idiot! There are two little boys running around. Grab one, get him dressed." But because he was just looking at, we're going to church. It's almost time to go. Men don't look at, as a rule, the huge picture.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really, or you also can talk about, most women would say, I've told my husband where to find something, and he looks right in front of his face, and maybe he had to move a paper to find the paper he was looking for, but he doesn't look. And so that's a huge one that causes, I think, a lot of a lot of complaints with women.
I'm sorry I'm laughing because as you're mentioning this, oh yeah, I do that. Yeah, that so, I had to laugh when you talked about the 2-year-old guys, the boys. So I'm just thinking, well, you obviously don't have these boys ready to yet. So what do you need me to do? You obviously can't figure it out yourself. You need me to step in. And I was like, oh, that wasn't the right thing to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just and that's the thing that, really does bother a lot of women is that you mean you can't really tell what needs to be done here? I have to tell you. And one of the complaints I hear from women a lot is, I feel like I have 3 children instead of 2 because I have to tell them everything that needs to be done. And again, I mean, it also comes back to what we just said about, you need to teach people how you wanna be treated. If you ask normally, most guys, if you ask him for what you need, they're willing to do it. But don't expect them to automatically read your mind and know what it is you want him to do. Now, if your best girlfriend walked in, she'd pick up a boy and get him dressed. She wouldn't have to ask, she would see it. But I think for women, they need to understand that just ask. Don't expect him to get it. Ask him.
That's a great point, Jan. And I'm thinking about how this is me now. I think that Google Maps really exacerbates this problem because what I do is I put in a location and all I see is the location, and I just follow that little arrow up the way there, but I don't take into consideration all the other stuff that surrounds that road that I'm traveling in. And so I remember asking somebody about an atlas, and they had no clue what an atlas was. But my had no clue, and they well, I just get my Google Maps out, and I thought, yeah, well, and so we have this thing in our hand, and it's really kind of a tunnel vision thing. It really is.
Mhm. It
I
is.
don't have the lay of the land, and you're saying that even though that's not connected with, so to speak, inner relationships, I think it just exacerbates the problem. All I need is this thing in my hand. I just need to go here, and that's the direct route kind of thing. And I don't need to see anything else. And it's big time problems, I think.
Well, and that's that instant solution. I mean, we could go off on that in many different directions, is that it really is affecting the way we think or the way we don't think. We don't have to think about those things anymore the way we used to. We used to have to figure it out. You used to have a map and you draw the map and you'd look at that. And the same way with, like spelling. When you're typing something, you don't have to spell it anymore. Google will correct it for you. So, I mean, it's very solution oriented for sure. But yeah,
Isn't
that's
that interesting that our current state of technology is hampering our ability to think for ourselves and problem solve, which then
absolutely.
carries over practically in relationships.
Mhm. Absolutely. For
Yeah,
sure, for
yeah.
sure.
Okay.
The one thing we didn't talk about is the fact that we were talking about how much we communicate. I don't know who counts these words, but men supposedly use 25,000 words a day and women use 50,000. And somebody's counted all these words. And that's interesting because, men have used all their words before they get home. And so, you get home and a woman wants to, says something like, well, how was your day? And what do you say, Bill? It's a
Fine,
lie. And
fine.
she's still got 25,000 words left. So, I mean, and this is fascinating too. I read a study many years ago, I think, that they studied girls in the nursery, baby boys and girls in the nursery at the hospital. And they found out that baby girls move their mouth more than baby boys do. Isn't that fascinating?
It is. It
It's
is.
fascinating. So, we're kind of wired that way. And again, if we can kind of have some kind of understanding that that's the way we are, then we don't have to think, well, he's ignoring me, he doesn't care, or she never shuts up. Or if we can understand that this is the way we are wired, that it doesn't solve all of our problems, but it really does help. I cannot say clearly enough. I wish that young couples would have some kind of a class before they get married about communicating like this and understanding to some extent the differences.
Sure. Jan, when you said that, or we in our previous conversation about today, you said that I thought I never really thought of that, and now you're making me think about, if stonewalling is what guys like them prefer. Let's put it that way. Their preferred style in conflict. Stonewalling. It's because we don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't have the vocabulary words. I don't know what to say. I really don't. Genuinely don't know because I've maxed out on my word limit for the
Mhm.
day. That is a really interesting piece. And so maybe one of the things that, so to speak, us who do this for a living, can help people is find vocabulary to talk about this stuff. You run out of words. Your woman partner has got 25,000 more words to use that you don't know. That blew my mind when you said that a week or so ago when we talked.
Yeah, and that kinda goes into that whole idea of how men process by thinking about something, where women process by talking about it. So another clue that would be helpful for couples to understand is that if you really want input from a guy, you need to give him a chance to process it. Because we might run off and "Well, what do you think, honey?" And he goes, "What?" Because he has to have time to process. So if we would say, "Hey, I've been thinking about this, and, can we have a conversation about that later today?" And then you give him time to process because we're gonna process by talking. You guys process much more by thinking, and we put you on the spot because we want you to answer it now.
Well, I agree with that so much. That makes so much sense. When Karen says, "I have an idea," I go, "No," you know, because I'm feeling the pressure. I need to have a response here.
Right.
He's thought about this idea for a while. This is all new news to me, and of course, then I got my immediate reaction is no, just hold on, you're wrong. But if I could just say, hey, can I just think about this for a day or 5 minutes or whatever?
Exactly.
Us guys need to say, I need to think about that you've done some good thinking about this. Let me think about it.
You gotta process it by thinking.
Boy, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, you're right about that. Absolutely right.
Well, and it's funny because sometimes when we're talking about something, I can speak for myself at least here, I'll be talking about something, and then I realize as I'm talking about it how stupid it is. But I'm saying it out loud because that's how I process it. Men wouldn't do that. They would think about it first before they talk about it. So I think that's a really important point for people to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. But we've talked about some really good things here about the differences between men and women that you've seen, certainly in your practice, but also you've lived it as well.
Right.
What are another one that you said that I found really intriguing is that guys tend to be focused on like a competence
Mhm.
and efficiency, achievement, that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And women are more emotionally oriented. We want to see results, and that's what all of those other that I
Exactly.
used to talk about are about. Well, what do you see? How do you see that working in a relationship then?
Well, I don't think that means that women aren't focused in accomplishments. I mean, because they are. They wanna be successful. They want to, feel like they have purpose. It's the way and the amount of attention that puts on that. Women still, by and large, again, this isn't always true, still find their satisfaction in their families and in their relationships. And that bears itself out when you look at how many most women have more girlfriends than guys have guy friends.
Oh,
Guys
yeah.
golf together, they might play cards together, but they don't have these intimate discussions together the way women do.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
For sure. And men are, and even I suspect on the golf course, men are talking about what they're doing and their businesses and whatever. Women are probably talking more about their families. And so, not that accomplishments aren't important to women and not that family isn't important to men. It's more the way that they get their kind of their own self-esteem from and their own value from. And so there's a little bit of difference there, and that can cause conflict. I don't see that causing as much conflict as some of the rest of these things, to be honest, because I think we kind of instinctively know that more than we know some of the other things we've talked about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I might come home, having breakfast with a buddy this morning.
Mhm.
And Karen might say, "Well, how was it? What'd you guys talk about?" Well, nothing.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And women are talking about everything. You know,
Yeah.
we share with each other so much more than men share with their guy friends.
I think that's absolutely true. We tend to talk about sports or maybe a significant event that's happened, politically or whatever. But as far as actually talking about or complaining, but actually talking about, hey, I'm really wrestling with this. This is a problem for me. Whatever. Yeah, I that's usually you know not done for guys.
As a guy, Bill, why do you think that's true? Why do you think that men are much more reluctant to share more about themselves than women are? As a guy,
Well,
why do you think that is?
Oh, I do think that we have some societal things that talk about what manliness might be, and some of that's good, and some of that's not so good. I think that's a piece of it. I do think that guys, by and large, hunters gatherers kind of thing, versus tending to the home fires.
Mhm.
That's kind of a human trait that guys are the protector and we don't have time to be talking about that other stuff. I think that's a piece of it. The other part of it is, well, what kind of family was I raised in? Because I do believe we pass on those generational things. And if those are values that came from in our family, that we're going to stick to that. I think that's kind of what's going on.
Mhm.
I think it's I believe it's getting more critical now. I think there's more, at least as I experience with my friends and in my practice, there's more depression in guys, and I don't mean, some of it's really, chronic, really serious stuff, but just kind of this persistent depressive stuff, and I do think that men in particular, more anxiety, they're jacked up more. So I think that's a big thing that's happening for guys. I think more men feeling pressured to perform about all kinds of stuff. I think that's in there as well. But one of the big things I'm noticing in guys that are like 35 and younger, a general sense of, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life.
Mhm.
Kind of a not directed anywhere. I don't, maybe not even finding any meaning and purpose in life. I'm finding it more and more and more. And one of the interesting things that I'm getting some guys that are coming in, and while they haven't said this per se, but it's, Bill, could you help me get a girlfriend? Do
Yeah,
these sort of things.
not so much, right? Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. They lack the ability to interact with other people, particularly people of opposite sex.
That's social media, don't you think? A lot of it is social media.
I think that's a piece of what I said culturally, social media feeds into that. Of course it does, big time. I mean, everybody's got every person in the world's got a phone, pretty much. You
Exactly.
know, I mean,
Exactly.
you've been to Haiti many, 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 many times. You see phones there all the time.
We do. It's almost universal. Do you think that also we talked about how men value competency. Do you think that men are afraid to share their true self because they won't feel competent or they don't want other people to see that they're incompetent? Do
I,
you
I
think
I believe that's true. I believe that's true. That competency, is really important, and that we need to come across as, we got our act together, so to speak. Which is why a lot of guys are reluctant to get into any kind of therapy because they think something's wrong with me. I would say, no, nothing's wrong with you. There's some things we can work on, but it's not like there's fundamentally. How many guys have come to me and say, "Bill, fix me"? Oh, wait, wait, wait. This is not about fixing. Again, competency kind of thing. So
sometimes I find that in counseling, guys and you wouldn't think this would be true, but I think it is sometimes. Guys sometimes would rather talk to a female because there's not that competition because they can be more vulnerable with a female sometimes than they can with another guy.
oh,
You said
that's
something else there that I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about a little bit, and that's about our family of origin. The way we interpret what our spouse says has a lot to do with how what we learned growing up.
really.
For instance, if nobody cared about our feelings growing up, we're afraid to express them now. Or if we always got in trouble if we spoke our mind, we're going to be much more of a turtle than we are if we had grown up in a family where you were allowed to express yourself.
How true that
So
is.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't, as a counselor, we have to look at, if we don't have to dwell on it, and it's not about blaming your parents. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what were my take homes when I was growing up? What did I learn about communication when I was growing up? How did my parents communicate? How did I learn to express feelings, if I learned to express feelings? So those things are incredibly important when, if for instance, here's a great example. If I say to my husband, and this, I'm being personal here and nobody tells him, okay? But if I say to him, "Did you take out the garbage?" I'm asking, and this is a silly example, but I'm simply asking for information. Did you take out the garbage? Sometimes he can interpret that as, well, you idiot, you forgot to take out the garbage. That's not what I meant. I simply meant, did you take out the garbage? And because of men feeling competent, sometimes they misunderstand where we're simply asking for information. Does that
Well,
make
that's
sense?
Yeah, it makes that is really good. There's the event, i.e., did you take out the garbage? Then there's the emotional meaning I put into the event. You're telling me that I'm incompetent. I'm going to act on the message I think you're telling me. I think you think I'm incompetent, and I'm going to take out the garbage and be resentful or whatever about it. But I think you're right on about that. And my question is that going back to, did I hear that? Did my parents tell me that? Did I hear that at home, or that I heard that I was incompetent, or those kinds of messages? I
We are all interpreting whatever stimuli comes into us through our own screen.
Yeah,
And
for
that
sure.
screen is everything that's ever happened to us. It doesn't have to be parents. It could be, colleagues or playmates or whatever. But everything that we experienced is a part of who we are and how we respond. And if they
Yeah.
don't understand that, we can get in a lot of trouble in a relationship because we're filtering our interpretation through our screen. I don't know how better to say it than, this is a screen that we have that everything gets filtered through. And so if we don't understand that coming into relationships, then we can also create problems that we didn't even know we were creating.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me, and of course, that's making me think about, now. This could be a topic for another whole podcast
Yes,
about
absolutely.
emotional triggers, so to speak, that get set off
Mhm.
in relationships, and the triggers are ways by which I'm filtering this information that you sent me. I'm an adult now, but I'm hearing this stuff as an 8-year old, and I'm going to act out of that. I think Terry Real, who's really just a great therapist, talks about my adaptive child, my 8-year old, and my maladaptive adult. I've taken that same hearing screen that I had at 8, and now I'm applying it to when you tell me to take out the garbage, and that's maladaptive. And so I'm going to act out of that maladaptive stuff instead of letting my adult Bill say, dude, she's only asking, to take out the garbage, as opposed to, she's telling me I'm incompetent. And again, that emotional triggers, the triggers, which I like their description. They call it during vulnerabilities. I really like that description because I think that's exactly what that screen is that you're talking about. That we interpret things through. That's really
I
good.
agree. I agree.
Well, any other thing that you see that we ought to talk about as far as the differences? We could go on forever, that, but
Absolutely, we could. Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. I'm looking at my little list here of things that we talked about. We talked about processing. We talked about, looking for solutions versus also we want to be understood, not just as, a case to be solved. We want understanding. And I think that that's incredibly important for you guys to remember that we just want to be understood. We don't want things fixed. We want you to try to understand. So I think we've covered most of the ones we were talking about
okay.
before.
Okay. So Jan, we step into the elevator together, and we're gonna go up a couple of floors, and the door closes, and you can now I'm a captive audience, and so what what's your elevator speech about? What is it you want me to? What's the message you want me to leave that elevator with from you about what we've talked about, the differences between men and women?
I think that for both sexes, we are not trying to make problems with the way we respond and the way we communicate and the way we behave. We are simply, and you mentioned back to, caveman. And it sounds, to most people, that sounds a little silly, but it's true. Men were the hunters, women were the homemakers, and there's still a little bit of that inside of us. So that kind of leads us into talking about we are different. We are definitely different. We process, we talk, we behave differently. And understanding that and taking time to really understand those innate differences is incredibly important for our relationships. That would be my elevator speech.
Well,
Understand that the other person isn't trying to be difficult.
that's really good. I like that. I'm not really trying. I don't want to start a fight here, or I'm trying to be difficult. I'm just, yeah, right. Well, thank you for listening to Guy Shrink today. My guest was Jan Meyer Nielsen, who's a therapist here in the Perrysburg, Toledo area. Been around for a long time. We've known each other for more than 50 years for sure.
50 years, right?
Yeah, it's just a great conversation and your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your wisdom about the differences, some of the basic differences between men and women in relationships. So you've been listening to Guy Shrink, the podcast where we talk about what keeps a guy awake at night, or sometimes what ought to keep a guy awake at night. And so we're on all the usual platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. So drop me a line if you like what we're saying, or you got a suggestion, or you got a critique. Bill@guyshrink.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you all next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.